Okay, so welcome back. This is lecture Unit 2, Topic 2, the Mongol Empire and the Making of the Modern World. This is still Unit 2, Networks of Exchange. Okay, what I'd like you to do is I want you to take a minute. I want you to pause this video right here, and I want you to read through the following statements. And I want you to determine which of the following is not true about the Mongols. Is it they created the largest land-based empire in all of human history? Is it that they engaged in biological warfare? Is it that the Mongols never lost a naval battle against Japan, who was known for its maritime prowess? Is it that they made protein shakes by letting milk evaporate in the sun? Or is it instead of metal armor, they preferred silk shirts because it made them more agile, and the silk formed a mesh around arrows shot into the skin, which made it easier to pull them out and carry on the Mongol tasks? So of those, which of the following is not true? Pause the video, think about it for a second, and then restart when you're ready. So the false statement is the Mongols never lost in naval battles against Japan, who was known for its maritime prowess, whereas the Mongols were not. So the biological warfare fact is the infamous story of the Mongols catapulting plague-infested bodies over the walls into the Black Sea port of Kaffa, which is modern-day Ukraine, in 1347. Milk was a central part of the Mongol diet, and many foods were derived from milk to sustain Mongol warriors on long journeys. The milk paste formed by the evaporation process would be mixed with water, which made it easy to carry as an instant meal. Early in the Mongol Empire, soldiers did not wear the metal chainmail that was common elsewhere. They used silk and leather for protection. Because silk is so fine, it does not readily puncture when shot with an arrow. The silk catches the arrow as it sinks into the skin, which does in fact make it easier to extract as it acts as a barrier to infection. This brings up a startling point that Mongol soldiers were trained to take arrow hits and then just pull the arrows out of their own skin and keep going. So here we have a snapshot of the Mongol Empire. Before we jump into the details of the Mongol Empire, this is a quick overview of some main events within the empire, which lasted from 1206 to 1368. The Mongol Empire begins when Genghis Khan, also known as Genghis Khan, is named leader of the Mongols in 1206. Then, rapid Mongol expansion and conquest begins and continues through Genghis Khan's death in 1227. This is an important point in the Mongol Empire because power struggles over succession result in the splitting of the empire into four separate regions. The khanates that rule over distinct areas of the world. The precise date at which these khanates are truly separate entities is actually up for debate, but the process begins after Genghis Khan's death. Conquest and expansion continues, making the Mongol Empire the largest land-based empire in history. The Mongol Empire falls into decline in the 1300s and comes to an official end in 1368 with the fall of the Yuan dynasty. And this brings us to our big question for this topic, and I want you to think about this throughout this entire lecture. What was the impact of the Mongol Empire? So the thematic learning objective for this slideshow that I want you to think about for these slides is governance. So if we're looking at that spice tea chart, that's the politics in spice tea, as well as economics and cultural developments. By the end of this lesson, I want you to be able to explain the process of state building and decline in Eurasia over time. I want you to explain how the expansion of empires influenced trade and communication over time, and explain the significance of the Mongol Empire in larger patterns of continuity and change. Historically, at this time, empires collapsed in different regions of the world and in some areas were replaced by new imperial states, including Mongol khanates. The expansion of empires, including the Mongols, facilitated Afro-Eurasian trade and communication as new people were drawn into their conquerors' economies and trade networks. Inter-regional conflicts and conflicts between states and empires, including the Mongols, encouraged significant technological and cultural transfers. So let's begin with the origins of the Mongols. In topic 2.1, the Silk Roads, we discussed the Mongols in the context of the expansion of the Silk Road trade network expansion. We already know that the vast rule of the Mongols helped facilitate the growth of the Silk Roads. Now let's take a closer look at the origins of the Mongols before they began their notorious conquests. Before the Mongols were united under Genghis Khan, which I'll provide more on the next slide, the area of present-day Mongolia in the East Asian steppes north of the Gobi Desert was home to several groups of nomadic tribes that depended on herding goats, sheep, yak, camels, and horses. These groups were often in conflict with each other and fought over lands and access to water. In 1206, Temujin united many of these tribes and proclaimed Khan of the Mongols, and this marked the beginning of what would be the Mongol Empire. Mongolian pastoral nomadism differed from other types of one-time nomadism. Many peoples throughout history have undertaken nomadic journeys for many reasons, but these are often large-scale for the purpose of escaping a certain circumstance or searching for better opportunity. The Mongols were cyclical nomads, meaning they continuously moved according to the season. Their nomadic movements were for the purpose of providing enough grass for their herds throughout the year, being within close proximity to water during certain seasons, and making sure there were flat areas during spring when animals were weakest after winter, as well as moving into windy, higher altitude areas in summer to protect from biting insects such as mosquitoes. So a typical Mongolian regional tribe would have maybe 3 to 4 unique spots that they would move through in a yearly cycle. So how does Temujin unite the Mongols? Genghis Khan, born as Temujin in the harsh Mongolian steppes during the late 12th century, rose from humble beginnings to become the legendary leader of the Mongols. In a time of tribal division and constant warfare, Temujin displayed exceptional leadership skills and strategic acumen. Through a series of alliances, military campaigns, and shrewd diplomacy, he united disparate Mongol tribes under his rule, earning the title of Genghis Khan, which means ruler of all. Genghis Khan's visionary military tactics, organizational reforms, and dedication to meritocracy transformed the Mongols into an unstoppable force, ultimately establishing one of history's largest empires, stretching from the Pacific Ocean to Eastern Europe. His indomitable spirit, charismatic personality, and unparalleled ability to command loyalty from his warriors cemented his legacy as a conqueror and a statesman. This is a good opportunity to remind you of the term meritocracy, so thinking back to Unit 1. Remember, meritocracy is a political system in which economic goods or political power are vested in individual people based on ability and talent, rather than based on wealth and social class, like aristocracy. We can draw parallels between the success of the Mongols and the success of the Chinese, remember the civil service exam, through their systems of meritocracy and government. Take a look in the upper right-hand corner, the Mongolian script there. That is the name of the Mongol Empire, which it gave itself, which means the Great Mongol Nation. This script is derived from the Uyghur alphabet. We'll return to this culture transfer later in the lecture. So what exactly contributed to the success of the Mongol army? Well, the Mongol Empire existed from 1206 to 1386. But during that relatively short period of time, they conquered enough land to create the largest land-based empire that ever existed. How did the Mongol army achieve this? Here we have pictured is a reconstruction of a Mongol warrior that, and this is from the Art Science Museum. So first off, superior military tactics. Genghis Khan revolutionized warfare by introducing innovative military tactics that were ahead of their time. The Mongols were expert horsemen who excelled in mountain archery, enabling them to engage in hit-and-run tactics with a remarkable speed and precision. Many Mongol horse-mounted warriors would take several horses with them on campaigns, and this enabled them to switch out tired horses for stronger horses. They also perfected the use of composite bows, which had a long range and greater accuracy than the weapons used by their opponents. Genghis Khan also emphasized discipline, strategic maneuvering, and intelligence gathering, allowing his force to adapt to various terrains and outmaneuver larger armies. Most military campaigns were very carefully planned and utilized intelligence about the enemy, which often put the Mongol army at an advantage once military action was underway. So let's look at the military organization and hierarchy. Genghis Khan implemented a series of organizational reforms within the Mongol army, which greatly enhanced their effectiveness on the battlefield. He established a hierarchical command structure, dividing his forces into units of different sizes for different purposes. Tumens were units of 10,000. Mingans were a unit of 1,000, and Zuns were units of 100. And Arbans were a small unit of 10. A Tumen would be comprised of smaller units such as 1,000 Mingans. The smaller groups within the Tumen would report to the leader of the Tumen, called a Tumen Unoyan, who exercised autonomy to make decisions in battle. The leader could use his smaller subgroups to complete different objectives in battle. It worked like armies within armies. This decentralized structure allowed for swift decision-making and effective coordination while providing flexibility in combat. Moreover, Genghis Khan promoted based on merit rather than noble birth, ensuring that capable individuals were in key leadership positions, and this fostered a highly skilled and motivated army. We also see psychological warfare and adaptability. The combination of the aforementioned weaponry and military structure created a very powerful army. However, the Mongol army was often much smaller than those of the places they sought to conquer. Their use of psychological warfare and their ability to adapt very quickly to new situations is what made the Mongol army infamous for its brutality and swift victories. The size of an incoming Mongol invasion was often hard to pinpoint because the Mongols frequently used tactics to make their army appear larger than it was. The extra horses brought along would have lightweight dummies or captured civilians placed upon them to exaggerate the size of the cavalry. At night, they would create long strings of bonfires to stimulate camps that weren't even there, making the enemy think they were surrounded by a much larger army. They also employed a tactic of tying large tree branches for horses to drag, which would create huge dust clouds as their army approached, making it look far bigger than it actually was. Upon approaching a town, the Mongol army would proposition the town to surrender or face complete destruction. In cases where the town did not immediately surrender, the Mongols made a point to destroy and burn everything, but to strategically allow some people to flee. These intentional escapees would then spread a message of terror amongst neighboring populations, making them more likely to immediately surrender. Additionally, as the Mongols conquered new places, they immediately integrated those willing any military or those with any military engineering skills into their army. Most notably, Chinese engineers greatly increased the Mongols' army's ability to construct new weapons on the spot. Pictured here is a Mongol battle in the top left and an execution in the bottom right. So why did the Mongols expand? We know the Mongols originated from separate tribes of nomadic herders in the area north of the Gobi Desert who were united under Genghis Khan. We also know that they had a really effective army for conquest. But what are the reasons behind this rapid military expansion? The most often cited reasons for the sudden explosion of the Mongols deal with environmental factors, trade issues, and Genghis Khan's shamanic beliefs. There's actually a really good video. I'd like you to take a minute when you're done with this lecture, or a couple minutes, and go watch it. And it really summarizes the Mongol Empire up for you really well. The link to that YouTube video is in the description. So this is also a really good point to tell you that these three statements right here represent the historical arguments that address the question of why Mongols began expanding from their pastoral homeland areas in Mongolia. So, environmental factors such as lower temperatures, less grass, and shorter growing seasons, and threat to pastoral nomadic life. When it comes to trade issues, the Jin and the Xia dynasties in China began to cut trade with the Mongols, resulting in Mongol raids and later full-scale invasions. And then Genghis Khan's shamanic beliefs. Sky god Tenggeri commanded Genghis Khan to unite the world under his rule. So, after much fearsome war and invasion, the Mongol Empire, under the leadership of Genghis Khan, stretched from the Pacific all the way to Eastern Europe, making it the largest land empire in all of history. When Genghis Khan died in 1227, his third son, Ogedei, took power over the empire. He undertook efforts to expand further into Russia and into China. Efforts to expand into the Indian subcontinent failed. So let's examine successors and the split of the empire. Upon the death of Ogedei Khan, his wife, To-Regene Khatun, took power as the head of the Mongol Empire. She ruled from 1241 to 1246 when her son, Gayuk Khan, took power. Gayuk Khan died in 1248 after just 2 years in power, and his wife also succeeded him as a ruler of the empire. She ruled from 1248 to 1251 and was followed by Mongol Khan, the last ruler of the unified Mongol Empire. When he dies in 1260, the empire split into distinct quadrants, each with its own ruler. More on that on the next slide. You do not need to know or memorize these names, these rulers. It is more important that you see how power quickly changed hands every few years after the death of Genghis Khan. This contributes to the struggle for succession that leads to the splitting of the empire. The coin in place of Torregana Khatun's picture was minted during her reign. So, Mongol expansion. After the death of Genghis Khan, there was a line of continuous succession to the Mongol throne, which we saw on the previous slide. This quickly changing power at the seat of the empire, coupled with the empire's expansive territory, led to a fracturing, breaking apart of the Mongol Empire into four distinct khanates. While the four khanates are still referenced as part of the overall Mongol Empire, they were all ruled by Mongols and furthered the Mongol objective of expansion, they were separately governed. For this reason, you will see these khanates referenced separately in readings or sources. For example, when talking about Mongol rule in China, we typically see Yuan dynasty rather than the Mongol Empire as the name for that political entity. So let's examine cultural transfers. Pax Mongolica. Before the Mongol conquest began, the Eurasian region consisted of isolated smaller imperial states. The Mongols changed this by uniting the area stretching from the Pacific all the way to Eastern Europe in the 13th century. This unification under one ruling empire allowed for a steady, peaceful period to flourish known as the Pax Mongolica. That's Latin for Mongol peace. This event allowed for the rapid growth of trade primarily along the already established Silk Road routes. Before Mongol rule, these routes passed through many different states, so the roads were not equally maintained and they were unsafe at many points. The Mongol Empire made a huge impact on the modern world, hence the title of Topic 2.2, because it created the conditions necessary for important ideas, knowledge, and technology to spread from East Asia and the Middle East into Europe. In the last topic, we discussed some of the transfers that occurred along the Silk Roads, such as goods, beliefs, and even diseases. But there are other important cultural and intellectual transfers too. The Mongol Empire made it possible for numbering systems to arrive in Europe, and the advanced medical and scientific knowledge from the Middle East also came to Europe during Pax Mongolica. It was the Mongol Empire which helped lay the very foundation that would set Europe up for the explosive age of exploration and colonization of the world that we'll explore in Unit 4. This is one of the most important ideas that you should take away from this lecture on the Mongols. Religious tolerance and transfers. One reason the Mongols were so successful at governing newly conquered peoples was their religious tolerance. They actually went further than just tolerance and often adopted or incorporated religion into their government. Because the Mongol Empire was so vast, many different religions became integral parts of the empire. Khans of the various khanates often converted to the regional religion. Nestorian Christianity was practiced by Kublai Khan's mother and was an accepted and promoted religion. Many Mongol leaders, such as Teguder Ahmad, Sultan of the Persian-based Ilkhanate and son of Hulagu, converted to Islam. In China, Kublai Khan enlisted Islamic scholars because of their incredible knowledge of science and medicine, and he also promoted and converted to Buddhism. By embracing the local religions, the Mongols effectively made religion a tool of successful conquest and also helped to spread various religions. Marco Polo wrote about Kublai Khan's view of religions, and Polo quoted Kublai in his travel writings. The quote you can actually see here on the right. There are prophets who are worshipped and to whom everybody does reverence. The Christians say their God was Jesus Christ, the Saccharins, Muhammad, the Jews, Moses, and the idolaters, Sakamuni Borhan, that is, Sakyamuni Buddha, who was the first god to the idolaters. And I do honor and reverence to all four. This is to him who is the greatest in heaven and more true, and him I pray to help me. The Mongols of the Yuan dynasty were particularly fascinated with Tibetan Buddhism and enlisted Tibetan Buddhist monks to spread the religion throughout East Asia Mongol territory. This was not the first introduction of Buddhism to the Mongols, but this effort to spread Tibetan Buddhism under Kublai Khan had lasting impacts for Mongolian culture. Pictured on the left of this slide is a Buddhist shrine in the Erdene Zu Monastery in Karakoram, the former capital of the Mongol Empire from 1235 to 1260. The monastery was built in the late 1500s and survives today as a lasting indication of the influence of Tibetan Buddhism on the Mongols and Mongolia. On the right is a statue of Ondar Gegin Zanzibar, one of the most important and influential Tibetan Buddhist monks in Mongolian history. So, cultural transfers, Uyghur script. You may remember from our study of Japan in Unit 1 that they adopted the Chinese writing system and later adapted it to fit their language. Similarly, the Mongols did not have a native written language to correspond to spoken Mongol. Old Uyghur script, which is a type of Turkic script, was adopted by the Mongols in the 12th century after Mongol conquest of the Uyghur territory in 1209 by Genghis Khan. The Mongols incorporated well-educated Uyghurs into the top ranks of administrative Mongol society. Uyghur script was one of the major forms of communication on the Silk Roads during the Pax Mongolica period. The image on this slide is an Arabic astronomical text written in 1363 by Samarkandian astronomer Hoja Ghazi al-Sanjufini, who dedicated it to Prince Radna, a descendant of Kublai Khan. This is why both Arabic and Mongolian appears in the book. The horizontal text across the top is clearly Arabic, while the vertical script seen in the margins is Uyghur-based Mongolian script. So here, this is just a quick reference sheet for you guys regarding the empires of dynasties which fell to the Mongols during the period of conquest and expansion, which is on the left, and the empires or dynasties which rose in the wake of the decline of the Mongol power. The Russian Empire technically begins much later than the fall of the Mongols, but the loss of power within the Golden Horde helped set the stage for the Russian Empire to emerge from a period of growth and consolidation. It is helpful for you to see this macro snapshot of empire cause and effect, just in case you were asked to explain a political cause and effect of the Mongol Empire. And these right here, this cheat sheet, is a great starting point for you. So, to practice the process by which you should tackle multiple choice questions, we are first going to look at just the question. On the next slide, you're going to read the source that this question is based on, but I want you to be familiar with this question first. So read this question, and then I want to ask you a question. What should you be looking for as you read the source? Pause this, think about that for a second. Okay, hopefully you came up with the answer, the type of impact Mongols had on China. That is what you're looking for in this question. So let's do a little bit more multiple choice question practice. I want you to read the following passage. You should have a passage of this in your guided notes. I want you to read and annotate the passage independently. When you're done, then I want you to flip to the next slide, and we'll kind of go through the multiple choice questions together. So on this slide, here are the questions. The question is, which of the following best describes the most significant lasting impact of the Mongols on China? So I want you to pause this, and right off the bat, I want you to try and eliminate two answers. So two answers. This should be a standard practice, regardless of how easy or obvious the question seems. You should always try to eliminate two answers. So pause the video now. Try to eliminate two answers from there, and then we'll continue on. So the two most obvious wrong answers are likely A and B. Answer A references cultural traditions, which are not mentioned at all in the passage. And answer B is just flat out a contradiction to the source, which is titled The Impact of the Mongols on East Asia. At this point, you need to decide between answers C and D. So I want you to take a moment, pause the video again, and see if you can figure out if it's going to be C or D. Well, hopefully you came up with C. C is the best answer because the passage focuses on the creation of a unified, militarily powerful China. The line, the Mongol conquest prevented a permanent division of North and South China and blocked the emergence of a permanent constellation of Confucian states, illustrates the main idea of the passage and leads us to our correct answer. Answer D is a distractor that mentions Tibet and references current tensions between China and Tibet, which you may be familiar with, but the source does not address the origins of modern tensions between China and Tibet, and is therefore not the best answer. This one is tricky because the tensions between China and Tibet do have something to do with a dispute about whether or not Tibet is historically an independent nation. China frequently cites Tibet's integration into China in the 13th century during Mongol rule as a reason that Tibet should remain part of China now. However, answer D asserts that current tensions between Tibet and China are a result of the incorporation of Tibet into the Mongol Empire. But most historians agree that current tensions have far more to do with ethnic and religious differences between the two, not their connection through Mongol conquest. Answer D is a really good example of a difficult distractor answer that can trip up students if they stray too far from the provided source. All right, and that is everything you need to know for topic 2.2. Here are the key ideas for review. Please take a minute to write these down in your notes. These are what you should be familiar with for sure on the AP exam, so make sure you're studying these key ideas. And as always, make sure to check my descriptions. I will have a link to the Mongol video in there, as well as Heimler's topic 2.2 AP World History review video. Have a good night.